Hey Nerf Herder, I'm Addy Thomas.
I am Ben Milton.
Thanks for joining us for another episode of Certain Point of View. Thank you for joining us and being a part of the podcast that we have as part of the Certain Point of View family. Not only do we have Certain Point of View, we've also got stuff like Another Pass, we've got the Scruffy Nerf Herders, and plenty of other shows, including one of the newer editions, Screen Snark, with our own Matt Storm and Rachel Schenk, and they're often joined by a single guest, and they all each share a little bit about a movie that they've recently watched and kind of get into depth about that and that particular guest and what they do creatively. So
yeah, I completely botched that description last episode, and I apologize to those guys. You nailed it. You absolutely nailed what they do. Thank you, Addy.
Sure. You can check out that and other podcasts that are part of Certain Point of View on our website at certainpov.com. All right, let's go ahead and get into today's episode. We're going to cover a couple things. So we're going to talk about Punisher Season 2. But before that, we're going to get to the Star Wars portion of our episode, and we're going to talk about 2 episodes of Resistance that happened over the past 2 weeks, which is funny because we talked recently about that new Star Wars Resistance teaser, but we didn't realize the show was actually back. So you can
we're
see,
huge fans.
Yeah, no, amazing
we're the
fans.
best.
we're totally on top of this. But yeah, we'll talk about those 2 episodes real quick, and then we're going to go ahead and talk Punisher. So if you have not seen Punisher Season 2 and want to avoid any spoilers, be sure to, shelve this episode for maybe a little bit later. But for now, you can find all of what we have to say about Punisher Season 2 here, along with the 2 most recent episodes of Star Wars Resistance. So kicking off Star Wars Resistance. So the first episode we had was entitled Bebo, B-I-B-O. And this was some more like fun shenanigans on the Colossus. We had, what's funny is like with some of the content that was in this episode, then that I knew was coming in this episode. I was actually kind of looking forward to this one, but the execution wasn't quite where I was into it. Because this is an episode where Niku found this Niku and Kaz found this slug sort of creature that Niku adopts and smells terrible and is annoying and eats at everything, and it turns out it brings this super giant kraken type creature to the Colossus, which that was really cool seeing the kraken type creature attack the Colossus, and the aces have to go at it, and you end up finding out that this little creature Bebo is the kid.
Yeah, and that the giant kraken is mom. Yeah, and I called it like as soon as they had the thing, I was like, oh, it's the kraken's mom.
Yeah, I was totally in the same boat with you there. I was like, the moment we saw the little creature, I was like, oh, this creature's gonna, yeah. To me, this was a really disappointing mid-season return. Like, yeah, this isn't where I would have done the return.
Yeah, this was just like, this was a fine episode. There's nothing wrong with this episode, and it is a kid's show. And so, like, I just had to, like, kind of roll my eyes a couple times and just be like, all right, well, this episode's not for me. But it's not what I wanted for a mid-season return, and I'm kind of surprised that they chose it.
I would have picked the previous episode, Station Theta Black, the one where they find that outpost that has, some connections to Starkiller Base.
I wanted an episode that kind of picked up from that and kind of kept the story going. This really didn't do anything to keep the story going.
Yeah, I do imagine that now that we know this Kraken-like creature is out there, like kind of like how I would expect how like the hyperspace whales ended up becoming important in Rebels. I kind of feel like, let's shelve this creature at the moment. It may become useful down the road, type of thing. And now that you have this connection between Niku and Bebo, you have some potential for using it. Right now it doesn't work. This episode wasn't great, but I do feel this was set up for something down the road, that part of like that theme that Filoni and his group of guys really like, this idea of, creating harmony with nature. I think they're set up for that, essentially.
Yeah,
for down
sure.
the road.
I see
and
that.
It may not be, later in the season. It could be 3 seasons from now or something. But I think it's entirely possible. Like this feels like one of those kind of moments,
Yeah. Yeah, and it felt like that kind of an episode. Like there's hopefully going to be something more out of it later. But for right now, like it was a fairly uneventful and unsatisfying beginning to the second half of this first season.
Yeah, I'd agree. And then we'll actually jump right into the next episode, which was called Dangerous Business, which didn't do a lot for me. I just didn't really track this episode as well. Actually, Ben, tell me a little bit about this episode. We had a guy from a mining colony.
You had a guy from a mining colony, and you're right, the mining guild, and he Kaz has made a deal with the 2 parts dealers who own the store that he got some parts to fix up one of the ships, and in turn he's going to watch the store for them while they go visit one of the guys' mom, which is kind of funny. And so this guy comes in and he wants a part that's very rare, very dangerous, can be used as weaponry. And Kaz has been instructed not to sell any of those types of parts. So Kaz doesn't, and then the guy tricks Kaz into making a delivery of other parts to him, locks him in a crate, and then proceeds to rob the store while BB-8 is minding the store. And they did it again. Like they just gave BB-8 even more gadgets to play with this time, and despite his ridiculous tool set that he has as just an astromech droid, he's outwitted, and the guy steals the thing. And
they do reveal First Order connections with this guy
at the very end. Yes, yeah. So, all in all, I mean, at least now they're getting this story was a little bit more story involved that I want from this show than the last episode, but it wasn't earth-shattering by any stretch of the imagination.
Yeah. No, I'd agree. Yeah, and this felt also sort of uneventful. Again, long build, at this point is the stage that they're in right now. That being said, let me read the episode titles for the next couple episodes. So the next episode's called The Doza Dilemma. So I imagine, we're going to have, at the end of that, Commander Doza choose to give in to the First Order and accept the deal terms, for them. Yeah. Which is followed by the First Order occupation, which is pretty self-explanatory. Then we've got an episode called The New Trooper. Then an episode called The Core Problem, followed by The Disappeared, and then episode 18 has not been, the episode title has not been released yet.
Interesting.
So yeah, I do think we have
some big story coming up. Yeah,
I think we're hitting that stretch right now. Now that they've kind of set up a lot of different elements here, based on episode titles alone, it does feel like a much more focused on the First Order story element at this point. Yeah. So we'll see how that plays out. Let's see how all of that kind of looks based on the trailer. For this back half of the season, there looked like a lot more First Order action. So I think there's a lot to be optimistic about. Just these last 2 episodes were not quite what we were looking for. So.
Yeah, it's almost like one of those deals where it's like they have too many episodes to do, and so they kind of throw in some filler episodes occasionally.
Yeah,
and maybe that's not it, and maybe there is some long-term payoff for these 2 episodes.
I think there is.
We'll see. Yeah. Filoni has done a great job of that in the past. We'll see.
Yeah,
we'll see. I think so. Probably 2, but probably not this season.
Yeah, and I agree with you there. Totally agree with you there. So, all right, so we're going to move on into The Punisher. We're moving out of Star Wars mode and into The Punisher. So, again, if you have not checked out Season 2 and want to avoid any spoilers, this is the time to hit pause, and you can come back and listen to this episode after you've checked it out. But we are not going to be any we're not going to spare any spoilers on this. So
you're getting it all. If you haven't seen it, turn back now.
What's interesting is we haven't gotten an official announcement yet that this is that
it's canceled.
Yeah, that the Punisher's been canceled. I'm a little surprised
shocked that today it didn't. I was surprised. Like I had to look for it on Netflix.
Yeah,
they buried it on my Netflix.
Oh yeah, it was not. Yeah, it was not particularly upfront. Like I think I had Sebastian Maniscalco as his stand-up special. Yeah,
which looks hilarious. I watched the trailer.
He's a funny guy. Yeah, I've seen some of his stand-up before, so I do like him.
But when I logged into Netflix, that was not what I was expecting to see. Yeah. I was expecting to see Punisher.
Based on my Netflix viewing habits, it should be recommended.
It should have been, yeah. So, I mean, clearly the deal between Marvel and Netflix has soured considerably between both parties, or at least from Netflix.
Deal any further.
Well, I don't know that they can. I mean, the only thing they can do is cancel Punisher and Jessica Jones at this point. Everything else is done.
Right. So, sort of the brief overview version of this season was there was some cool stuff done, but it was sort of left us with some mixed feelings on it.
They did some things that I really, really liked, and they had some characters that I really, really liked. And then they made a couple decisions that just kind of left me not disliking it, but feeling cold about it, like not really caring or just unsatisfied.
Do you think any of that is affected by like just this overall like, oh well, we know this is probably the last season of this Punisher, as good as it is? Like, do you think that sort of like pall hanging over this affects our viewpoint on it by any means?
No, because I went into it like really excited, knowing, hey, this is the last one. I can't wait to see what they do with it. Like let's see where this is going. Let's see if they if they're planning on setting anything. It doesn't even feel like they're setting anything up.
For sure.
Like it feels like this was it. Like they knew this was it, and they tried to make a story that was going to be satisfying for fans of season 1. And in some ways it is, and in other ways it's just kind of like I don't love it. Like it wasn't really what I wanted. Necessarily that story. It was actually, that story is what I wanted, because I remember the end of season 2 I was super excited to find out that Billy was going to be Jigsaw.
Yeah.
I was like, I can't wait to see what they do with Jigsaw. This is going to be amazing. Jigsaw is an incredible character. Let's see what they do with him. And honestly, like that was sort of the thing that let me down the most in this season was Jigsaw.
Yeah. I agree.
And how they handled it. And how they handled it was should have been very interesting, and it should have been compelling, but I didn't find it like that. For some reason, it just felt it fell flat for me for some reason.
So we're dealing with a story here where Billy has memory loss as to what he did, and the way he remembers things, he and Frank and Curtis are all still tight. They're still brothers. This is before he's done all the terrible things that he did to to set up his company to make the money that he did, all the crappy stuff that he did with the CIA, and then not to mention, of course, the big thing
killing Frank's family.
Yeah, and attempting to kill Frank as well in that process. So, there's a lot like. There's a lot that we know he's guilty of, but we're kind of like in this position where he is suddenly you're trying to figure out whether or not he's just playing his psychologist or and the rest of the world, or if he really is having these memory issues. And in the course of it, you find out he really is having these memory issues, and it's such a weird position to be in, to want to have to empathize for him, which is, to this season's credit, is a very bold decision to make.
Yeah, for sure.
In a lot of ways, it does work, but I think, unfortunately, like you said, there's some weird. It kind of leaves you in a weird spot because of that, because he's a bad guy. That there's no real question that he is a bad guy. And they don't even really try to stop him from being a bad guy, even outside of all of his memory loss. Like, he still does some pretty awful things. It's not like he's on the path to redemption.
But that only happens after, he starts to find out about his past. Like, when we first meet him in season 2, like, he legitimately doesn't know what he's done or where he's, the things that he's done. And he is horrified as he goes along to find out the things that he's done.
Well, here's
he has regret. He has regrets about the things that he finds out. Like, he's horrified to find out that he shot Mahoney.
That's true.
And as he is exposed to more and more of his past, he kind of leans into it.
Which is funny because it creates this sort of tragedy where the characters that are seeking vengeance and seeking to end him in some ways push him down that path, and also the psychologist that is trying to fix him is also pushing him down that path, which I think that's sort of the Shakespearean aspect of the story. Yeah,
where you really end up feeling like, oh god, like he didn't have a chance, like because he has the opportunity to be a good character.
Yeah.
And by good I mean like morally good. He's Ben Barnes does an amazing job in both of these seasons of portraying this character. He's fantastic. I have no qualms, nothing bad to say about any of the actors in either of these shows. They're fantastic. But he has the potential to be a redeemed character because of the memory loss. But like you said, like because of Mahoney, because of Frank, because of the psychiatrist that's working with him, they all push him down, back into the life of Jigsaw, and it is a tragedy. Like it's this season is like the tragedy of Jigsaw, and that's not really what I was there for.
Yeah.
I was like, I don't really want to feel morally ambiguous about Jigsaw.
Yeah.
That's not a character I really want to like. Frank Castle is morally ambiguous enough.
Yeah. To add that onto it is almost a little bit confusing and disorienting in a way.
Yeah, because Frank does some truly horrific things.
They also pull the taffy on that storyline a lot. Like, that storyline could have been a lot shorter. That being said, what started out as the A-plot was incredibly fascinating. Having something that wasn't necessarily mob-oriented, but a politician trying to cover up, or a politician's parents trying to cover up a potential scandal, and what really wouldn't have been a scandal anymore, but something that they, as business owners and like ultra-conservative Christians, would have been ashamed of. Just kill people left and right to try to cover their son, a U.S. senator's reputation. Oh my god, terrible things.
Yeah. And the hitman that they hire to organize it all is a fascinating character. Yep. And he's called Jack Preacher, and he's based on the character the Mennonite in the comic books, who's a lesser known character. He's been around a while, but like when you think of all the Marvel characters, nobody is like first in line to be like, dude, I'm a huge Mennonite fan. Doesn't happen. So they dig down in the barrel a little bit for this character, but this character is really interesting.
He's got a great intensity to him.
Yes, yeah, the actor's fantastic. I don't know who the actor is, but I want to see more of
We've
him.
seen him in a couple things before. I know I've seen him in a couple things on TV.
He's too good to not be in anything else.
Yeah.
And you're right, he has like this intensity, he has like this quiet intensity about him, and he's playing a man of God who kills people.
Yeah.
And his wife is dying of cancer. He's got 2 boys, and he's being manipulated by the aforementioned these religious right-wing parents who are like, I get kind of like
wealthy business owners.
Yeah, and kind of leading a cult in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
And his slavish devotion to his religious identity. He's a former Nazi. He's got his Nazi tattoos, and you can see that he's having them removed, but they're not all quite gone. They're still there underneath the surface. which was a great metaphor, a great visual metaphor for that character, because as the season goes on, we watch him fall back into his old lifestyle before he was a religious man, and he's just a savage. He is frightening. And he's coming after this kid that Frank Castle ends up taking under his wing, and hilarity ensues.
Right. Well, it's the driving force of the first 4 episodes in particular.
Yeah. And the last one.
Yeah, they kind of let the story die a little bit as Jigsaw's story kind of moves into the forefront. They literally just kind of push aside this story for a while, which is a really odd sort of structure to this season. Because I feel like this A story really was the story of this season, the real particularly strong story for this season. So it was a little odd to see how it kind of shaped up. But that being said, I do like a lot of their decisions in this season to not kill the Mennonite, to redeem him in a sense, to give him
and have Frank do it with him.
Yeah. I was really happy for that turn, because they do a good job at making you empathize with him, and because he is a character that is seeking redemption from his past, but because of his skills is put back into this for very terrible purposes, and is manipulated into this in a very terrifying way. I mean, these people are terrible people, but I think it was almost frustrating that it took so long to find out why they did what they did.
Yeah, I think in a lot of ways, I would have preferred a Batman Begins structure to this story, with Jigsaw taking the role of Scarecrow, where he's just kind of there, sprinkled in throughout, creating all this havoc and problems for Frank as he's trying to save this girl at the same time. But instead they go the opposite way with it. But instead of having the Mennonite in the middle causing havoc for him, he's just bookended on both sides of the season.
Right.
So you get it up front, but then really there's nothing happening between the Punisher and the Mennonite for 8-9 seasons, or 8-9 episodes, and then you get it all at the end. And I kept wondering, okay, when are we going to get these guys all in a room together shooting at each other? I want to see a Mexican standoff between these 3 killers. That's what I wanted to see.
The season finale, you really could have just played yakety sax throughout the entire thing, with the way one guy thinks he has this hostage, but he doesn't have the hostage, and then he does have the hostage, and then he doesn't have. It's just it is just a crazy misadventure there that I thought it was hilarious. It was hilarious. It worked out fairly well.
Have you read a lot of Punisher yet?
Not really.
That shit happens all the time in the comic books.
Oh, does it really? Okay. I just thought it was hilarious that there's they're
we're gonna meet up and we're gonna exchange hostages. Oh crap! I don't have a hostage. Right. Now I gotta bluff my way through it.
Yeah, exactly.
I'll just kill everybody.
I thought it was still fun to sort of see that, and I think it did add to sort of Frank having sort of a helplessness with some of that by the end of it all. Which there are 2 things that I think come out of this, is sort of Frank's relationship with his brothers, and then Frank's relationship with Amy as sort of the big thing. I think it's really interesting. It's so funny how you do the the pairing of the super badass with a young girl is it's almost a trope now. It has to be a trope now.
It is a trope, absolutely. Yeah.
But it's
the alpha male saving a teenage girl. Yeah.
Right. It's pretty effective. I know Wolverine does it all the time. Wolverine, that is the Wolverine story that works every damn time.
Yeah.
But it works. It works. In a really interesting way with Frank, just because Wolverine is a softie, and Frank Castle not quite as much. So to see him soften up when he does is actually like that was some of the more effective moments when he pretty much calls Amy his daughter essentially to get to be for her to escape the scene and everything. I thought was a really cool thing to do. So I thought there was some good payoff there in that story, in that arc, and on the adventure that the two of them kind of go through as they get to know each other over the course of this whole season.
Yeah, for sure. And I really like the speaking of ancillary character arcs, I liked what they did with Agent Mahoney. I thought her arc was really good in this season too. Madani, I'm sorry, Mahoney. Yeah, actually, I liked Mahoney too.
I do too. Yeah, absolutely. But
because they both had a fairly significant role this season, and it was good. I liked both of them. Madani in particular, like her arc was fascinating. Of like
her obsession
of just coming to terms with, nope, Frank is the weapon we need. This is what we're going to use to solve this problem. Compared to season 1, where she's still more idealistic. She's more like Madani, and of like, no, these guys, we need to bring him to justice. And she's like, this is justice. This is how justice is going to be served. Is through the Punisher.
Yeah.
And that was interesting. It was nice growth for that character, and she did a fantastic job portraying that conflict as time goes on. Because Frank not only goes up to the line but crosses it, for what she thinks justice should be. And she's confronted with the reality of how the Punisher handles things may not be what she really wants. And she's still conflicted about that. By the end of the season, she's not. And she's completely on Team Punisher. But it's interesting to watch her kind of walk that tight line and try to make sense of it and justify it. Meanwhile, you have Mahoney there. Mahoney, Officer Mahoney, who we met in Daredevil. Still having that sense of justice, still having the sense of like, no, these guys got to be brought to justice and put them in jail, yada yada yada. And so there's that tension too. And so you have somebody on the street, from a legal standpoint, hunting Frank as well, which adds a little intensity and urgency to the situation, which was good. I mean, it all helps the plot move forward and keep things moving. There wasn't a lot of like downtime in this season. I didn't feel like there was like a mid-season lull. Like it was never at a breakneck pace. But I never felt like I did in like Luke Cage season 1, where I was like, okay, like this mid-season, I have no idea. Like I don't really care.
Yeah.
There's like 3 episodes there you could cut. All these episodes kind of do roll into together. The pacing is more spread out in this season.
Yeah, I agree.
But then you never have the super highs either. In this season.
Like you don't have that like final great push in those last like 3 to 5 episodes that most of these Marvel Netflix shows have been able to make happen. Yeah, which was, it was a little disappointing for me, but at the same time, I didn't have to sit through 3 episodes I didn't care about. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I was a little bummed that they didn't kill off Madani. I thought seemed like there was a moment where she was, and it seemed like the appropriate end to her character.
Yeah.
But that being said, like they still made some good use of her character there. After that fact, the psychologist was an interesting character as well. And that relationship with Billy Russo. Big thing, this we've spent a little bit of time already talking about, so we'll probably have a briefer version of that discussion. But the end, you have Billy Russo bleeding out in Curtis's basement, where he hosts his
chat sessions.
Yeah, the support
therapy
groups.
Chat session.
Yeah, and Billy calls Curtis to just kind of ask him to keep company with him as he dies, and instead Frank gets the call to come, and you're what's sort of an interesting moment here is like this is where I think the season could have been made, and it didn't quite work for me is Frank. Frank kills Billy pretty much on the spot, right?
As he's apologizing, yeah.
Yeah. It's a weird thing to say, but because my thought is maybe it's really not the Punisher. That is in the Punisher's nature to do that. But knowing that Frank knows that Billy is dying here, and that this Billy doesn't remember at all what he did, I would have actually really liked him to sit down with Billy as he died and just kind of have a share in a brotherly moment, as in the end there.
And then kill him. or just let him bleed out.
Or just let him bleed out.
Yeah, letting him bleed out isn't in the that's not the Punisher's character. That would have been
not at all.
pretty far. That would have been a pretty big stretch for him.
Yeah.
I would have liked to have a little more of a conversation and a coming to peace with it. Although, but that's really only because we were made to kind of
empathize
with Jigsaw. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's the only reason I want that. Otherwise, I would have been like, oh yeah, if Castle sees Jigsaw, it doesn't matter if he's bleeding; he's going to put a bullet in him. But it's only because of that, and so it ends up leaving you kind of with mixed emotions about it, where you're like, yeah, Jigsaw got his, and you're like, oh man, I can't believe he killed Jigsaw. That wasn't cool,
right?
And that's not what I go to the Punisher for. I don't go to the Punisher for moral ambiguity. I go for just straight up street violent justice. Right? Like that's if I want moral ambiguity, I'll read Daredevil. Where people are wringing their hands and questioning whether what is right and what is wrong. That's not the Punisher. And that's what was weird about this season. It was that there was a lot of that from Frank and from the other characters too, where everybody was kind of put in situations where they have to question what they're doing. Is it right? Is it wrong? And when you have the Punisher questioning what he's doing, I don't know. It's a little off the beaten path for me as far as a Punisher story goes.
Yeah, I can see that. I can definitely see that. Yeah, it was an interesting. I think it was interesting in that it made you really think about it and question it. It just wasn't quite the show that we were looking for.
Yeah, that's not really what I was looking for. I wasn't looking to question, Billy's moral compass after he's had his memory wiped. That's not what I was looking for. So whatever. But again, just because it wasn't what I was looking for, I feel like a Last Jedi complainer. Just because it wasn't what I wasn't looking for doesn't mean it's not good. It's still a very, very good season.
Oh yeah,
very good season,
without a doubt. Yeah, I mean, here's the thing: we finished this in the opening. Weekend.
Yeah, it couldn't have been that bad.
Yeah. Trust me, we would have taken a lot more time if we really didn't like it. So,
trust me, I still haven't gotten started on season 2 of The Runaways.
Yeah, exactly. We talked about that. That's been out for at least a month.
And I haven't even started it.
Yeah. I will say, look, I do want you to at least leave with one complaint about this particular season that you and I both agree. And that's Jigsaw's scars.
Yes. And this, and we're not the only one. I've seen this complaint online, and it's been pretty vocal. People are like, what is up with Jigsaw's face?
Yeah.
There's just not enough scarring. The scars are clearly deep, clearly painful. But he doesn't, for as much as, he's wearing a mask and he's complaining about how mangled his face is, he's still a darn good-looking dude.
Right?
I wish I looked that good after having my face, scarred like that. Yeah, I mean, it just wasn't enough. For when we see Frank bash his face into the carousel and the breaking glass in the mirror, and he just
grinds. It's a painful scene to watch.
He grinds his face across it. I envisioned that there would have been far worse scarring than what we got. But
yeah.
Plastic surgery is pretty amazing nowadays. Maybe that's a realistic representation of what it would look like. I don't know. I mean, I'm not a doctor. It's not my area of expertise by any stretch of the imagination. But as like a fan of the comic, Jigsaw's like scarred.
Yeah.
His face is a mess.
In some ways, it felt like the mask was more where the scarring was.
Yes.
And they were making the scarring the emotional and mental
psychological.
scars.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Which, needs to be there too for a character like Jigsaw. But I also wanted the physical manifestation to be a little more dramatic than what we got. And that being said, the scarring that we got looked amazing.
Yes.
It looked great. The makeup artist did a fantastic job of applying those prosthetics. But yeah, they weren't there just wasn't quite enough for what I envisioned those scars being after season 1.
Absolutely.
So, can we talk just real quick before we go?
Yeah.
You and I went to the movies today and saw Glass.
Oh yeah, we'll do a quick review of Glass too. Yeah.
What'd you think?
I fell asleep.
Yeah, you did.
Yeah. Here's the thing. I was prepared for a slow movie too.
Sure, it's a Shyamalan movie.
That's how slow it was.
Yeah.
It was just flat. That was the thing. I did all the things I do to prepare to make sure I don't fall asleep in a movie anymore. Like I had my drink and everything.
Yeah.
Paced it out, and it just still I just couldn't.
Couldn't make it.
It held my interest early.
Yeah.
But then I started losing interest at the
once they get into the whatchamacallit, the mental institution.
Yeah,
you just kind of stop caring about the story.
Yeah, and early stuff in it, in the circumstances of it, are sort of interesting, but they really pull that thread a little just too long.
Yeah.
And the payoff at the end, even though I was asleep for good sections of it, I was still able to figure this movie out, along with your help as well. And it's just I'm not sure what the point or the. Yeah,
I'm with you. I have no idea what the point of the movie was.
It was almost that everybody could be a hero and don't let people stop you from being a hero. But only
if you're special.
Yeah, which whatever. I mean, I actually don't mind Shyamalan throwing in messages like that. Signs. Yeah. I like Signs a lot.
Yeah,
honestly.
Signs is fun.
That's one of the Shyamalan movies I actually like a whole lot more, and that has a lot more of that kind of character work in it.
Mm-hmm.
And those thematic elements along with that character work in Signs works really well for me. And I think there was an attempt to have a lot of interesting character work in these three movies. Unbreakable is still incredible.
Amazing, yeah.
Yeah, still one of his absolute best. I still got to watch Split, so
it's great.
That's where I'm at a little bit of a disadvantage, and maybe
not much though. I'll be honest with you. I mean, it's not much. They kind of spell it all out in the movie. It's just not very interesting at that point.
Yeah, it didn't feel like Glass. It didn't feel like Samuel L. Jackson needed to be up front and center for this entire movie.
And they have him drugged for 3/4 of the movie.
And I think that hurt it for me. You needed to lean into this guy's charisma. Samuel L. Jackson could have carried this movie. And it was almost like they just pushed it away from him. And for what this movie ends up being, they really needed to lean into him in a much bigger way.
Yeah, because it's not until he wakes up and starts doing things that the movie gets interesting again.
Yeah, and which I get, that's also part of the structure of it. That being said, there's some I feel there's some perspective problems in this movie. Having what's the point of view you're going with, and it seems to switch quite often.
Mm-hmm.
So sure, there's a certain reveal about the nature of a particular character, and that's fine. It's kind of predictable, and that's fine. I'm not gonna fault, even though that's Shyamalan's gimmick, I'm not gonna fault a lot of people for predictable things, because I think we're just so well versed in movie reveals at this point. It's hard. It's
hard
genuinely,
to be surprised.
Yeah, it's genuinely tough to be surprised anymore. And even the nature of it, you could kind of see it coming. And when you do have the reveal happen, it's oh, okay, well that makes sense. I'm not shocked. It doesn't rock my world, in the way that a Shyamalan movie once did. But I think I think choosing a point of view would have helped a lot to keep some sort of consistency. Even if you maintained large amounts of mystery, if you maintained the misdirection with a character that you stuck with, so that when you found out the real direction and the real intention, like there was some reveal. But if you never got to explore that character enough to really understand what their motivation was, and it just ended up like it almost felt like an ending was tacked on to it.
Yeah, the third act is kind of a mess.
Yeah.
It really falls apart in the third act. The first act I think is really, really good.
Yes.
The second act kind of wanders around for a while and sets some things up, and then the third act just kind of falls flat. It doesn't really pay off very well. So yeah, I mean we had a lot of disappointing media this weekend.
Yeah,
we had 2 Star Wars episodes that neither one of us were really crazy about.
No, and we also watched it right after watching Glass. Not that those episodes were great.
Those episodes, I could have watched Avengers, Infinity War, and I would not have been pumped for those 2 Star Wars episodes.
Yeah, but I do think I would have enjoyed it a little bit more if I hadn't come right out of the disappointment of Glass.
Glass was disappointing, and season 2 was a little disappointing of The Punisher, and the first 2 episodes back of Resistance.
I should have just watched some episodes I should have just watched some episodes of We Bare Bears before. Yeah, it would have been better.
And here's what's messed up though. So right after we watched Resistance, so like that's our third strike of disappointment. You go, hey, why don't we watch Warcraft?
Yeah.
Which was another disappointing movie for me.
Yeah. Well, it's because we had listened to one of our favorite podcasts, Lorecast, from the Blizzard Watch folks. Like they had an interest. Like I hadn't rewatched it after I listened to their episode examining it. So I kind of wanted to. I've been kind of wanting to rewatch the movie. I was a little too tired to watch it today.
Yeah,
but I do want to rewatch that movie and kind of.
It's actually a little bit better than I remembered it being.
Yeah.
It's not as bad as I remembered it being. I've watched it 3 or 4 times now, to be honest with you.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah. And it's not as bad as I remember it being in the like being as disappointed as I was in the theater.
Yeah.
So it has some really, really cool moments, and they do some really cool things, but then they also don't.
Yeah. Well, I think we could agree that it was the wrong era and the wrong story to be their first.
Yes,
movie.
Absolutely the wrong story. That was not the story I wanted to see played out.
Yeah.
So
anywho, let us know what you think about Punisher Season 2, Star Wars Resistance, Glass, whatever thoughts that you have, you can share with us on any of our social media, or actually where we would prefer to hang out with you guys is on our Discord server, because we got a lot of stuff going on there for all of the podcasts that are part of Certain Point of View, and of course our very own podcast as well. We've got lots of fun activity happening on all the various channels there. You can find the link to join our Discord on our website, certainpov.com. Again, that is certainpov.com, and until next time, stay scruffy, my nerve herder.